Good morning, ninth graders. We are continuing our read of Into the Clouds. We are beginning in the middle of page 151. We're moving through this book pretty quickly now. We are at a place where they are making another attempt to reach the summit of K2. Dee, Molinar, and the rest of the team spent June 30th hauling loads to Camp 2. When Molinar returned to Camp 1, he was spent. He'd been out for 8 hours. His legs barely held up his body. As he relaxed at camp, he heard a low growl high on the mountain. The growl built to a thundering roar, which finally materialized into a churning mass of snow, ice, and rock. Well within view, the mass hurtled down a gully and across the glacier until it slammed into the mountain wall on the other side and erupted in a billowing white cloud that climbed a third of a mile up the mountain. They were all starting to expect anything from K2, but it still rattled the nerves. The mountain, ancient as it was, felt alive at times. The glacier cracked and popped as the ice shifted underfoot. Snow piled on the slopes until gravity tugged it into giant avalanches. Lead climbers unleashed a barrage of loose rock on their unlucky teammates below. It wasn't long before another avalanche rumbled down the mountain even closer to Molinar's tent and dusted the camp with snow. Too close, he wrote in his diary that night. Since base camp, Molinar had been fighting a private battle with his nerves. Schoenig and Craig, Bell and Gilkey, they seemed to be climbing with ease. But for Molinar, most days were a struggle. The headaches came and went. He never slept well. By the end of the day, his knees felt weak and his lungs craved oxygen. The loads, it seemed, only got heavier as the team worked its way toward House's chimney, the gateway to K2's upper slopes. Molinar and the others were in fact carrying heavier loads than they had expected. Before the trip, Houston had been hoping for a team of Sherpa porters, expert climbers like Kukuli and Finsu. But Pakistan had given him a team from the region of Hunza. There were 6 men: Ghulam Mohammed, Khairul Hidayat, Haji Bey, Muhammad Ali, Hussein, and Vilyati. Only one had experience at high altitudes, and Houston wasn't planning to take the group past Camp 4. That meant extra work the Americans hadn't planned for. Even at the lower camps, they gave the Hunzas lighter loads to keep them from quitting. Still, headaches, backaches, or snow blindness put the porters out of action for a day here, a day there. Schoenig, who was always willing to shoulder the heaviest load, thought some of the Hunzas were plain sick. Molinar worried he wasn't pulling his share of the load either. He had his good days, but he needed more rest time than Schoenig or Gilkey, who never seemed to get tired. Each day he spent more and more time thinking of his family. Pretty soon he was carrying a secret with him into the tents at night. He didn't admit it to the others, but he was ready to get off the mountain. 2 days after the avalanche, he confided to his diary. Thinking of long climb ahead, many load relays, often wish mid-August was here and we were heading home. I miss Lee and Patty terribly. No more expeditions for me. A week later, on July 9th, Charlie Houston followed Molinar up a craggy cliffside at 21,000 feet. The days have been long and the nights restless for everyone, but Houston knew Molinar was struggling. But today, Dee seemed eager to lead. He moved up and to the left, pounding pythons into the rock face where he could and clipping his rope into the holes for protection. Behind him, Houston and George Bell followed, their arms and legs spread wide, clutching at tiny holes with their fingers and toes. Finally, they pulled themselves into the top of the ridge and paused to catch their breath. For the moment, Molinar hardly looked like a man who wanted to go home. From now on, they agreed the pitch would be known as Molinar's Madness. After a final scramble up a tall rock pinnacle, the three men stood staring up at an 80-foot cliff with a single snow-filled chute carved into its face. After 20 days hauling supplies up the lower half of the mountain, they had made it to House's chimney. Houston had been thinking about this moment for days. Like Molinar, he'd been secretly wondering whether he was out of his depth on K2. He knew he was a good leader, but he wasn't sure he could navigate the rock and ice like the others. In 1938, he'd given up a couple thousand feet below the summit. Now, most of his teammates were both younger and more skilled. Maybe he didn't belong out here anymore. House's chimney was K2's most difficult obstacle, and Houston had decided it would be his test. As they looked up the rock face, they could see pitons and fixed ropes from 38 and 39 wedged into the crack. But they were useless now, unreliable and frozen into the cliffside. Someone would have to lead the climb, fixing new ropes to protect climbers on the way up. Molinar or Bell, both better climbers than Houston, were the obvious choices. But Houston had another plan. He tried to sound casual about it. "Would you fellas mind too much if I tried to lead this?" he asked. With Bell and Molinar belaying him from below, Houston started up the chimney. He chose his holds carefully, trying not to look as clumsy as he felt. When he paused to gasp for air, he pretended to adjust the rope or blow his nose. The crack widened and he spread his limbs and levered himself up. Near the top, it narrowed again. His forearms throbbed and his lungs heaved, but he hauled himself over the lip and onto the crest of the ridge. He was dizzy with exhaustion, but as Charlie Houston sat on the ridge and caught his breath, a wave of satisfaction rose inside him. In a moment, he would help Bell and Molinar up. They would drop their loads and climb back down to rejoin the others. But right now, laid out below was one of the most sublime views on Earth. 2 glaciers, ancient boulevards of snow and ice, met a mile below, winding through a vast field of snowy spires. Masher Brum's 25,600-foot peak towered over them all. The mountain under Houston's feet rose more than 2,500 feet higher, and he had just conquered one of the hardest routes it had to offer. Now, if only the weather would cooperate, he knew he could handle the rest. "Come on up," he yelled down. "I've got you belayed like a house." Let's stop there on page 158. I want to just call your attention to a couple of the pictures that are it's just so striking that they have these photos, and to think that they were there. This is Molinar and Craig at the base of House's chimney. I hope you really take a look at that. Just think about that. You know, over 20,000 feet up. And this is the dangerous traverse above Camp 2 that they were climbing. And then, of course, the avalanche. You know, the avalanche, you know, would stop, I think, almost everyone. That kind of avalanche would just stop and say, "Not doing this, turning back." So really profound story. Hope you're enjoying it, and I look forward to continuing tomorrow. We'll begin at the bottom of page 158. Thanks so much, ninth graders. Hope you're doing well. Take care. Bye-bye.